Hi, I'm Laura Nelkin. I'm a knitwear designer. I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, and this video is a pre-clue video for my latest mystery knit-along, cOWL mystery knit-along. This mystery knit-along is going to be a hoot. It is knit with less than 500 yards of DK weight yarn, and the 4 clues are literally going to fly off of your needles. I am so excited to dive into this mystery cOWL with you all. If you don't know what a mystery knit along is when you have no idea what you're knitting, and every week you get a clue that tells you the next steps that you're supposed to knit. With my mystery knit-alongs, I'm always teaching new techniques. I have videos that come out with every clue to help you along the way. We have super helpful Facebook and Ravelry group for you to get any support or ask questions or just kind of show your knitting to each other. I'm highly involved with my mystery knit-alongs. I absolutely love knitting them with you. And this one in particular is, did I already say it's a hoot? It's an absolute hoot. So it is a cOWL that you're going to be knitting. It is not a thong for those of you who haven't done mystery knit-alongs with me in the past. And what I can say about this cOWL is that it is the latest in Hoot Couture. Ba-dum-bum. As you can see, owl puns, we'll be having them for the next 6 weeks. So just dive right in and enjoy yourself with those puns. If you don't know what a mystery knit-along is, I do have a blog post that does kind of a deep dive into how mystery knit-alongs work. I will link that for you below this video if you want to read a bit more and get an idea of the structure of them. But to sign up for the mystery knit-along, all you have to do is purchase the pattern. When you purchase the pattern, you will get a PDF that has all the information that you need to be ready to cast on with us on Friday, October 13th. In that PDF that you get when you purchase the pattern, it will tell you the yarns that you need, the needles that you need, how to work gauge, and anything else you need to be prepared. I am going to go over a few of those things with you in this video, so watch along and you will be ready to go with me on the 13th. Let's talk about the materials that you'll need for knitting the cOWL MKAL. First up, let's talk about yarn, because we all know that we love yarn. I've got a good story about the yarn that I used for this cOWL. I worked with my friend Susie at Fiber MacGyver, and we've built kits for you guys in I think 7 different colorways total. And Susie and I met at Rhinebeck last year at a dinner on Saturday night. And I did not know that she was a yarn dyer, and she did not know that I was a designer. We totally clicked. We had a great night. It was tons of fun. And then after the weekend, I found out she was a yarn dyer, and we slowly started like following each other and checking each other out. And so when I started working on this mystery knit along, I was like, I want to work with somebody new. And I love Susie's colors, and we had such a great time developing all the colors for the mystery knit along. So I'm going to show you a few of the kits that she and I put together and explain to you how color works in this cOWL. And then I'll also give you ideas so that if you want to go stash diving or go to your local yarn store or dye yarn for the cOWL, you'll know what you need to know to have success once you are knitting. So the pattern calls for 1 main color and 1 contrasting color. For the main color, I used 1 skein of Fiber MacGyver Merino DK. I'm going to put that underneath the camera so you can see it. This is a 246 yard skein. It's about 100 gram skein. Then I used 5 mini skeins. The mini skeins have about 49 yards on them each. Basically, 5 mini skeins equals 1 big skein. So you could do this mystery knit along with a main color skein and a contrasting color skein, or you can work with a gradient of 5 minis. So this is one of the colorways we came up with. You can see we did this fun kind of like zhuzhing gradient of color. It's okay for the colors to play off of each other a little bit. I think that this pattern is really really fun, or this design is really fun if you choose to go with mini skeins and you have your colors flowing from one to the next. I also think that a color exchanging skein, like if you have a gradient skein, that would work very well for this pattern. I'm excited to see what everybody comes up with. The most important thing is that your main color really contrasts from those mini skein colors, from the contrast color. So if you're not sure if you have contrast, one thing you can do is take a picture of your main skein and your mini skeins together and then desaturate it or look at it in grayscale. And if you notice that those colors are really the same, like they have the same value with each other, you might want to try something that has a little bit more contrast. So this is kind of one option. I can show you a few others just to kind of tease you. I love this one. I'm going to actually knit my second cOWL MKAL in this colorway because you know this is like my signature, this caramelly color right here. I love it so much, and I love the heat of this orange and those reds. So this is going to actually be my second one. And then the other thing you can do is if you're somebody who's a little bit more neutral, you could just kind of go for like a grayscale and then have like a lovely kind of red solid, or even like a black or a dark gray solid for your main color, and have something that's maybe like a little bit more subdued. So definitely ask any questions if you have any about yarn. I am happy to explain that all further. Once you have your yarn, you're going to need some needles for your knitting. And in this pattern, I use 3 different needles, all in the same size. The size that you use is the size that you get gauge with, and we'll talk about gauge in the next section of this video. But basically, you're going to need a set of double pointed needles. I would have a set of 5 double pointed needles. You can also work with magic loop if you know you like magic loop. And then you need one 16-inch needle, and then you need one 24-inch needle. The pattern calls for a US size 7. I am a pretty loose knitter, so I actually used a US size 6 for my version, my first version that I knit of the cOWL MKAL, and we'll talk about gauge and your needle size in a second. After you have all your needles together, one thing I could say about them is if you have an interchangeable needle set, that is going to come in very handy with this pattern. It's modular, the clues kind of like flow together from one to another, and having an interchangeable set, I think you're gonna really enjoy. The next thing that you're going to need is a bunch of Stitch Saver. Stitch Saver is hollow silicone tubing. You can get a spool of Stitch Saver. I was able to find it on Amazon. You can also sometimes find it at a local big box crafting store or at a beading store if you have one near you. A spool is not expensive. It will last you quite a while, and it is actually my current favorite knitting tool. If you've been following me for a little while, I can't really shut up about how much I love Stitch Saver. And you're going to need 6 60-inch lengths and then 6 20-inch lengths for working the cowl. So you might as well just get a spool and be able to play with it. I think there's about 50 feet on a spool, so you'll have it for quite a while. I will give you a link below to purchasing spools of Stitch Saver, and also to a blog post that I wrote about Stitch Saver. I will show you how to use it a little bit later if you've never used it before and it's your first time hearing about it, but pretty important. And then finally, you're going to need about 9 stitch markers. If you have more stitch markers than that, you can use more than that, but you're going to need at least 9. And I would make sure that one of your stitch markers is different than all of the other ones, kind of like is your accent piece. I worked with Jillian at Wee Ones, and she has made some gorgeous little owl stitch markers for the kits that I did with Susie at Fiber MacGyver. So if you're lucky enough to snag one of those kits, you're going to get a pretty special owl stitch marker in with that kit. So that's everything you need. If you don't end up using the stitch saver, you can use scrap yarn and a crochet hook, kind of giving myself away with some of the techniques used in this just by telling you about the needles you're going to need and the supplies you're going to need. And then you'll probably need a pair of scissors and a tapestry needle for weaving in just a few ends. So once you have all of that, then you're ready to start working on gauge. So let's talk about that next. Have I told you this is going to be a hoot lately? It is going to be a hoot. So gauge, the reason we do gauge, even though this is a cowl and not a sweater, is you don't want to run out of yarn. As you are knitting your cowl, if you run into questions with gauge, I will be giving you tips for each clue and how much yarn I used and how much yarn I had left over so that you can make sure that you're on track. But if you look at the gauge in the pattern, I call for a gauge of 18 stitches over 24 rounds, lightly blocked. I'm giving something away there because did you see where I said rounds instead of rows? So if you look down on my needles, you'll see that I have a swatch on my needles that has all of these little ends just on one side of the swatch. I am working this swatch in the round but flat. And what that means is I am always knitting and never purling, because when you work stockinette stitch in the round, you are knitting every round. And when you work stockinette stitch flat, you're knitting right side rows and purling wrong side rows. And it turns out that your gauge when you knit stockinette stitch flat is a little bit different than when you work stockinette stitch in the round. So it's really important that you work your gauge in the round. And I have this little trick for simulating working gauge in the round. If you haven't worked this before, I do have a separate blog post, but basically what you're going to do is knit to the end of the row, and then I'm just knitting to the end of the row while I talk to you. And then what you'll do when you get to the end of the row is take your yarn and give yourself about like 3.5 lengths of yarn, and then hold it so that your working yarn is over here. And then that extra length that you gave yourself is over there. And then you're going to go ahead and knit starting at the beginning of the row. And I should say that it's pretty important to do this on double pointed needles and not on straight needles so that you can slide your stitches to the other end of your needle. And you can see that I'm just knitting across. And when I get to the end, I'll have just a little bit of yarn left, and then I'll slide my stitches to the other end of the needle, grab that working ball, and start working with that. I'll definitely link to that video below so you can watch me talk about it a little bit more slowly and in depth if this is a new technique for you. So once you've knit a gauge swatch, I want you to cast on, what is it, like at least 24 stitches. You want to give yourself enough stitches on the needles that you get a pretty substantial swatch. Then knit a few inches, like 3 or 4 inches, and then stop and put that knitting on to some stitch saver or scrap yarn and then block it. So what I'm doing right now is quick knitting to the end of this so that I can show you how that stitch saver works. Okay, so I promised I'd show you how Stitch Saver works just in case this is new to you. The biggest trick with Stitch Saver is to make sure that you really jam it on to the end of your needle tightly so it's really on there. If you don't jam it on enough, then it might pop off when you're transferring stitches. So after you've put your Stitch Saver onto the end of your needle, now you can just take your stitches and slide them over onto the stitch saver, and then you can wet this and lay it down flat to block it and wait for it to be totally dry before you go to measure your stitches. And remember that you're going for 18 stitches over 24 rounds, and that stitch gauge matters more than round gauge for this project. So try to match stitch gauge. If you measure and you have 19 stitches over 4 inches, then that means you're going to want to go up a needle size so that your stitches get a little bit bigger. And if you have 17 stitches over 4 inches, then you're going to to want to go down a needle size so that your stitches get a little bit tighter and you have more stitches over 4 inches. When you are done with any knitting that is on Stitch Saver, if you want it back on your needle, then all you do is you take your needle, put it into the Stitch Saver, make sure you've really jammed it on, and then you can slide your stitches back onto the needle, and then you are ready to work again. One thing I didn't say, and this is written into the pattern, is you want to do your gauge swatch with your MC. You'll have plenty of MC left if you're starting with a 246 yard skein with that 100-gram skein. So use your MC, not your contrasting color, because you're really going to try to use up almost all of your contrasting color in this pattern. So once you have gotten gauge and once you have gathered all of your supplies, you are pretty much ready. Okay, I feel like it's important for me to tell you that we have a strict no knitters left behind policy in my Ravelry and Facebook group. So if you need help with this mystery knit along, we are here to help you. We will all flock together and make sure that you understand what's happening on your needles so that you have success with your knitting. I am going to set up a contest thread. So as you get ready with your yarn and your needles and you've done gauge, once you make a project page and you're ready to go with the mystery knit along, one of you who posts in that thread is going to win this bespoke, very special little stitch marker made by Jillian at Wee Ones that matches my little owl planter behind me that I got when I was in Florida last year. I'll tell you more about him over in Ravelry. So this is going to be the prize, kind of motivation for you to get together and make sure you have your yarn and you've done your gauge swatch and you are ready to go. I am so excited to knit this cowl with you. Okay, who's ready to cowl with me and listen to my owl puns between now and October 13th when the first clue launches for Cowl Mystery Knit Along? I'll be back.